Everybody's not in there.
Blessed. Hello.
Prentice, are we moving forward, or what's the status? Is now 6:04, 6:05?
Good evening. We will be getting started momentarily in about 1 minute. Apologize for the late start. It's like some folks had trouble getting on, so we had to make sure they could get on. So all the panelists, if you the advisory committee, which included development experience, community involvement, proximity to the Michael Reese site, and historic knowledge of the community. We then had a selection committee, which consisted of Leonard McGee, Reverend Andrea Davidson, Bill Gerstein, Rhonda McFarland of QCDC, and Mr. Jim Buckner. And then we selected all of the advisory committee members, who most of whom are present this evening. I will just quickly go over their names so that you might know who they are. But again, you can refer to this deck, which will be on our website and on the Department of Planning and Development website. But on the advisory committee, we have Jim Buckner, Jordan Buckner, Jennifer Knight, Professor Terry Nichols Clark, Mr. Leonard McGee, Mrs. Zakia Muhammad, Pastor John Smith, Mr. Kevin Stansel, Mr. Christopher Vaughn, Reverend Andrea Davidson, Miss Kimshasa Baldwin, Miss Nicole Hayes, Pastor Chris Harris, Mr. Desmond Orr, Dr. Enrique Beckman, Dr. Timuel Black, Mrs. Diane Dinkins-Carr, Ms. Sharon Eubanks Pope, Mr. Bill Gerstein, Mr. Craig Jeffrey, Ms. Tracy Bay, Mr. Calvin Lyons, Ms. Bonnie Sanchez Carlson, and Professor Janet Smith. And they've been working on, the Michael Reese development for some time, and have been representing the community very well. I might add, we've got expertise in so many different areas, and they have been so helpful to our office. So I just want to publicly thank them again for their commitment. The timeline for this development has, we've had various meetings throughout several years. Won't go and bore you with all of those meetings this evening, but again, you can refer to our websites to find out more details about the timeline that we've had. But it has led us to a better development with all the meetings that we've had. We've been informing the developer on the community's wishes and working hand in hand to make this project one that our community will be proud of for years to come. And speaking of proud of, we believe in community benefits. There are a number of them to which this development is committed. One of them is the Bronzeville Welcoming Center, which you will hear about more and see some renderings of possibilities to come soon. But the developer has committed to paying for half of this welcoming center, as well as making sure that is maintained with a percentage of the commercial resources that come in, so that we can have this community center for years to come. We also have a commitment for minority participation for the project above the city standards, which is normally 26% MBE and 6% WBE. We have a commitment of 30% MBE and 10% WBE. But again, to strengthen that, above and beyond that, we have a commitment of 65% to minority-led businesses and owned businesses. So that's something that we're proud of. We also have an educational commitment up to $25 million for future commitment after an assessment is done on the needs of educational facilities in the area. We also have up to 10 internships and 75 apprenticeships per year. We hope to involve, our neighbor Dunbar High School in that. We also have a commitment to local and small businesses. We've thought ahead by writing down the commercial space to 10% of the commercial space will be discounted to 20% below market rate. So we're thinking of our small businesses and certainly want them to be located here on this particular site. We're committed to 20% affordable housing on the site. A lot of developers choose to build their affordable housing, a lot of it off-site. We're committed to having that on the site, actually. And as far as some of the history is concerned, we are committed to maintaining the historical aspect of the Singer Pavilion, and then having a space dedicated to honor the history of the former Michael Reese Hospital site in that pavilion, as well as throughout the entire site. We're also committed to honoring the history of Bronzeville, and in not only the Bronzeville the Bronzeville Welcoming Center, but throughout the site as well. We'll talk about that a little later. We are committed to sustainability and regenerative design, to public open space. As we've said over and over, committed to not having a casino on this site, the Marshalling Yards, which is an adjacent site, as well as the Advocate site, which is just north of the Michael Reese site. We're also looking forward to having a new metro station at 31st Street, as well as new streets and enhanced roadways. So those and other commitments are things that the Michael Reese Advisory Committee has been working on behalf of our community to bring to all of you. So again, thank you for joining us. Now, I believe Scott Goodman will talk about the estimated total economic impact for this particular site. Scott, as I said before, is leading the GRIT development team, which was chosen from an RFP that happened several years ago. So Scott, I know you're familiar with these meetings, but welcome again this evening.
Thank you, Alderman, and thank you everybody for being with us tonight. We're pretty excited about our project and the progress we've made so far, and the impact it'll have both for our community, for the city, and for the region as a whole. It's going to take a while to get this thing built. There's a lot to do here. We think it could take up to 20 years. We hope a lot less time than that. But there'll be a lot of benefit to it. Just the direct, we call it the direct economic impact, which is just the economic impact on the site itself over a 20-year period, we estimate to be $3.8 billion. So that's money spent on the site, that's jobs created by the site, that's items sold on the site, all those things on the site. And the indirect economic benefit for the entire region will be over $8 billion, $8.2 billion. We see 30,000, almost 31,000 full-time jobs being created. There'll be over 17,000 construction jobs on the site over this time for and total estimated construction-related jobs, both direct and indirect, will be more than 45,000. So big economic driver for our city, for our community, for our neighborhood, especially at a time now with COVID, with the economic downturn. It's a great time. Our project really is going to not only be good for our neighborhood, but include our entire neighborhood. And we could not be more excited by it.
Great. I'm remiss. I think I skipped over a slide just talking about, or maybe not. Here it is. But in any case, I'd like to introduce to you Cindy Rubik from the Department of Planning and Development, who has really been shepherding this process, representing not only the Commissioner Cox and the plan development, but Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and doing it really well. So Cindy, can you just talk a little bit about the timeline and the plan development?
Yeah, absolutely, Alderman King. Thank you so much for co-hosting this, and everyone on the Advisory Council and Development team. We've been working very hard, as you said, over the last 3 years. So it's always exciting to provide an update to the community. So we've been working over this past year, bi-weekly meetings with several city departments, the Department of CDOT, Transportation, Asset Information Management, and Department of Law, but also with our sister agencies, Chicago Transit Agency and CTA and Metra. And we also set up a webpage, as you know, and so that has all the information and updates, and as well as this community meeting deck. And so we're able to also solicit public feedback. So if anybody has additional questions after reviewing the deck, feel free to submit that to the department. So the master PD sets the framework for future redevelopment on this site as it relates to the zoning regulations. So the master PD identifies kind of big picture components, right? The roadways, traffic signal locations, the development parcels, where the open space will be located, and the framework for the vertical development too in the future, such as allowable uses, the maximum square footages, as well as the maximum heights. And this master PD, like the other master plan development projects, will also incorporate design guidelines, and the main components of these design guidelines will be presented today by the team. In addition to the PD process, the project will also have a redevelopment agreement, which will include the public benefits that we've been discussing at previous community meetings and today as well. And the developer, Grit, is expecting to submit the necessary documents to the city for a plan commission meeting before the end of the year. And then the redevelopment agreement process is expected to follow soon afterwards. So that's what this slide is kind of talking about, the timeline.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Cindy. And again, thank you just for all of the work that you're doing on behalf of the city. We've definitely enjoyed partnering with you and the department on this development. So thank you. So the next slide is talking, and Cindy, you may need to help me a bit, but it's really outlining the planned development area. So you can see kind of the dotted lines, which outline the planned development. The difference here from the last community meeting that we had is we're including the Prairie Shores area that you see in kind of a salmon pink color in the overall planned development. And you can see kind of the red area on the screen, which shows kind of the overlap of the Prairie Shores site with the Michael Reese site. And for various kind of technical reasons, it was easier to include Prairie Shores in the overall planned development site. Cindy, help me out if I left out kind of any particulars that you think.
No, I think you explained it correctly. It's really to address the zoning conformity for the Prairie Shores parcel, which really those buildings were built, in the 50s and 60s. But the zoning code has since been changed at that time. And so we just need to make sure that that property, because the boundary is being modified, we need to make sure that, they're in compliance.
Right.
So you're right, it was a technical reason.
But the affordable components of the site will not change because of these, or there won't be kind of any downside to including this in the overall plan development, right?
Correct. Prairie Shores will be its own sub area. So it will be separated from the Grit sub areas 1 and 2 that you see highlighted in yellow and blue. And the Prairie Shores property won't be impacted for the affordable housing ordinance. There is an ability to make sure that the parking spaces that are impacted in those red areas are going to be, replaced by this project as part of this PD.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for that. So as we said before, the GRIT team has been leading the development of this parcel, and they have been led by Scott Goodman from Farpoint Development. Scott, if you can quickly just give an overview of the team and.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alderman. So absolutely a team sport here. So the GRIT team really made up of Farpoint Development, Loop Capital, Draper and Kramer, the Chicago Neighborhood Initiative, CNI, the Brownsville Community Development Partnership, McLaurin Development, Kaleidoscope Health Ventures, and a slew of consultants you'll see. And probably our biggest teammate and to whom we're very thankful is the MRAC in the Alderman's office. All things that we've come a long way, accomplished a lot, and again, really a team sport. So thank you to everybody for participating with us. Just going on to the next slide. We just want to talk about a little bit of our overall vision for what we're doing on the site as a whole. And really our belief and our overriding mission is to create really the healthy community of the future, really make it so everything we do on this site is socially and economically and communicatively beneficial. We're thinking about the health of everybody on there, everybody around there, in a way that really improves both economic and environmental indicators, while still celebrating the history and the past of not just the Michael Reese Hospital, but the Brownsville community at large. Which has such a rich and deep cultural legacy. And really what's kicking this off is a relationship we formed with Sheba Medical Center out of Tel Aviv, Israel, which is the #9 ranked medical center in the world. If we told you that Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Clinic were coming to put their innovation and research facility on our site, I think everybody would understand that. This is the equivalent of that. This is a world-class medical and research organization coming here to our site, helping with innovation, with health inequities, with telemedicine, and just bringing more jobs and more innovation to our site, and really helping us kick off what will be really the healthy community of the future. And going on to the next slide, you can just see some of the things we think about when we talk about being the healthy community of the future. This slide is really put together by Jason McLennan of McLennan Design, who is our strategic partner and a world leader in ecosystems and environmental. He's a design architect, really focusing on sustainable and renewable products. So when we think about the just equity of the site, dignity, just society, a community that is just filled with friends and interaction, place to work in a safe environment, creating an ecosystem and an ecology of renewal and regeneration. The way we eat, the way we move around, our belief in the culture and the arts, which is so important to Bronzeville, recreation and activity, how we live, all these things are just guiding factors on the site, not just one building, but each and every building, each and every place, each and every area on the site as we move forward. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David Scully from SOM, who's going to walk through the master plan.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So, along as Scott mentioned, we had a team of Jason McLennan, Chris Lee, and from Johnson & Lee, as well as Paul Peters from Hood Design Studio. And we all collectively worked on this framework. And we wanted to start with the streets, really putting together a, sort of network of streets that reconnects the site to the neighborhood, as well as allows for it to be both developed and phased in a strategic way. And this street grid does that. Next slide. And kind of building on that, we didn't just look at it from the site perspective. We zoomed out to understand the ramifications of this future development on the neighborhood's traffic and how that will start to operate and move, and really focus on pedestrian safety and how that will how the street grid can enhance and connect the community with that. Next slide. In addition to that, we also looked at transportation, right? Understanding that people may not all walk to the site or may not all drive to the site, but how do we start to look at multiple modes of transit, whether it's CTA bus lines that are existing and surround the site, but also potential for newer transit stations. So we've been really working together with MRAC and with the city and with the transit agencies at a proposed station that spans 31st Street to 29th Street on the Metro line, Metro Electric line. Next slide. And with all of that, we've really looked at, zooming into the streets and understanding the character and the feel of these streets and how they actually, start to work. And really focused around, as mentioned earlier, pedestrian safety, movement into the site. How can we make sure that these streets are designed as well as possible to accommodate all of these multiple modes of transit? Next slide. And to do that is, as was mentioned earlier by Cindy, we put together guidelines. And these guidelines are, both, for us as a design team, but for others in the future who are working on this site to set the bar for what's, what will come. So, whether that's around, sort of designing complete streets, looking at high quality materials with streetscaping, but also understanding how the street can really be part of creating a character and a feel that represents Bronzeville in its future. Next slide. Moving on to open space, which is really the next layer in this sort of tapestry of in this network of spaces to reconnect the site. We're looking at about 10 acres of open space on the Michael Reese site that work in this sort of connected, sort of network of a way, which I'll explain in the next slide. But one of the real things we were really excited about is hearing from MRAC and understanding how we can really illustrate and connect their ideas and the community's ideas into the public realm. Next slide. So a little bit on the open space, and it's really divided into these three categories: cultural ribbons or strands, as we called them earlier, which really look at sort of Cottage Grove as this key north-south boulevard, as well as this natural greenway that connects through the parcels and really provides an open space and nature, natural respite that the development kind of fronts onto. The civic parks. So we have two major, kind of larger parks, 31st Street as well as 29th Street Park, which will be, kind of in the future, as well as a series of social rooms that have a variety of programs that weave themselves east-west to the site. So next slide. And altogether, that really creates what we're calling the quilted landscape. And we worked together, as I mentioned, with Walter Hood Studio to really come up with this idea. And it was really a kind of a fantastic sort of tribute to try and weave together not only the site, but find opportunity to enhance and engage the culture of the neighborhood and the community into the open space. Next slide. And this is a view of 31st Street Park. 31st Street Park being part of the first phase. We've really started to dive in and really wanted to create a space that was welcoming and engaging and really a front door to the development and the community. Next slide. And just an eye-level view of what that space could be, integrating natural plantings, spaces for topography to find, kind of a different experience, arts and sculpture that would, kind of most likely be from folks in the community, as well as performance and kind of leisurely spaces. Next slide. And as mentioned, I'm sure you'll start to notice a rhythm here that these guidelines, we created a series of guidelines also for the open spaces. And the open spaces really, again, look to, find and create program that serves, kind of everyone in this area, residents, workers, invites people from other neighborhoods to come and visit and connect to the site. Accessibility, not only from, kind of the neighborhood, but also, accessibility for people with disabilities, elderly, et cetera. As well as high quality materials and finding opportunities to really integrate nature into the site. Next. And moving into really the development, this framework that we've created now creates a series of opportunities to bring investment and bring ideas. And to really start that off, we're looking at 4 projects. The Arc Innovation Center, which includes the Bronzeville Welcoming Center, as well as 31st Street Park in that sort of block. Senior housing, reactivation of the Singer Pavilion, as well as a data center. And we'll get into a little bit of each one of those projects in the next slides. Next. Really starting with the Arc Innovation Center. And, Scott mentioned it, Sheba and Arc are the, sort of anchor, but a big portion of this building is also really about engaging and interfacing with community, creating active ground floors, as well as really the integration of the Bronzeville Welcoming Center into the base of the Arc building. Next slide. And to dig into that a little bit, so the Bronzeville Welcoming Center is, kind of what we've just tentatively named the community space that, because was mentioned in earlier presentations, and, really designing it to both have an interface and a connection to the public realm and the public open space. And it's about 40,000, it is 40,000 square feet of space on the park that will be programmed and connected to community and focused on community. Next slide. And to give you a sense of what 40,000 square feet is, right? We looked at, a nearby, building, Ellis Park Field House, which is about 33,000 square feet. And as this project continues to move forward, the design of the actual space will, kind of continue to evolve with MRAC as well as community input. Next slide. So just a couple of views of the welcoming center and of the park. So trying to understand how this, kind of really has a welcoming and engaging sort of feel, that the building and the facade really connect you and pull people in from 31st Street. Next slide. So looking at, kind of the section drawing to start to illustrate both the space and the 40,000 square feet, but also how it integrates with the open space, and that there's lots of opportunities for a variety of types of program, whether it's focused around history, focused around the culture of the community, music, art, sort of performance, really leveraging this atrium space that could be sort of designed for kind of larger scale murals or kind of a rotating exhibit that could really display itself to the park and to the community. So really a lot of opportunities to continue to move this forward, and we're really excited about this space. Next slide. And here's the conceptual view of the interior lobby space that, kind of, again, indoor, outdoor, sort of feel, and finding opportunities to really connect the open space and really have the uses have the opportunity to also spill out into the open space and really own that plaza in front of the building and really connect to uses. Next slide. And it also has its own independent drop off. So for people who aren't walking or who are coming from different parts of the community, who may want to drive or who may have disabilities, there's an opportunity to really, sort of have a separate entrance along Lake Park and 31st Street. Next slide.
David, just a moment. Yep. Pastor Smith, we would like you to speak before we go to.
Yes, sir.
Sure. Thank you, Alderman King, for this opportunity. I'm just speaking on behalf of the MRAC Subcommittee on Culture, Community, History, and Arts. And one of the things that we've been doing as a subcommittee is vigorously advocating on behalf of our community for a commitment from the GRIT team in the city of Chicago for an extensive integration of the legacy of Michael Reese Hospital and the history of the Bronzeville community throughout all phases of the Bronzeville lakefront development. And so the illustrations that you're seeing are representative of our advocacy, in that we want to utilize public art and accessible public spaces that are designated to memorializing and highlighting the rich history of Michael Reese and the Bronzeville residents. We also have been advocating that there be relevant historical and cultural artifacts in building design and landscaping, and then essential on-site programming and community-inspired activities which promote and preserve the history and culture of pre- and post-Great Migration Bronzeville. In the physical space that you're seeing, both in the Welcoming Center and the reuse of the Singer Pavilion, is a request that we've made to make sure that there's physical space that helps facilitate the community's expressed desire for inclusion and representation. So I hope we see that as we go on in this webinar.
All right, thanks, Pastor Smith. Yeah, Prentice, feel free to move to the next slide. Yeah, to kind of almost really piggyback on that, I think one of the things that we've been really excited to do is really look to the community and look to the neighborhood for the materiality of the building, for the character. So really, starting with the lower level, the base of the building, if you go to the next slide, Princess, we looked at, kind of the masonry character and the history of the neighborhood, and how we can start to really interweave and connect those materials and those uses to really harken back to Bronzeville and make sure that this feels like Bronzeville at the end of the day. Next slide. So, as you can see in this image, we've really chosen to start with brick and start with stone to really start to look at how this space really both connects with the materiality of the community, but also has a scale that fits into the community and starts to work with the massing to start to step back, so it doesn't feel like a giant sort of block that landed from outer space, that it has context and a feel and energy and activity to it and an active ground floor. Next slide. And even in the upper register, we look to the modernist heritage and history of the Bronzeville community, whether it's Michael Reese, whether it's IIT, other, even Prairie Shores and as well as Lake Meadows having that sort of legacy to really connect with those materials and those feel and that sort of feel and ideology. Next slide. And as you can see, that rich history and the heritage really exists right down the street and right next door. So really leveraging that and pulling that into the upper register of the building. Next slide. That we really start to illustrate that sort of much more sort of clean lines, metal, steel, sort of bringing in light into those spaces. So finding ways to really connect both kind of the historic character as well as the modernist heritage to create a project that really connects with the community as a whole. And the overall, sort of idea of this sort of portal really connecting through and celebrating the Singer Pavilion and making sure that that's highlighted from the street, because we're really excited about how that building can be repurposed and reactivated in the future. Actually, if you go to the next slide. And kind of just to talk a little bit about some of the concepts around that. Jason McLennan and McLennan Design, kind of really came up with some really exciting and interesting ideas about the building and how to adaptively reuse it. And they're highlighted on this slide about sort of whether it's a photovoltaic super roof, whether it's looking at urban agriculture and how to integrate green technology into the building, looking at opportunities to leverage that green technology for workforce development or vocational opportunities, and finding ways to really connect to the history and heritage of the building and of the site in this last building. Next slide. In addition to that, some of the other projects, the data center, as I mentioned earlier, is really, kind of there to support and to connect to the Arc Innovation Center, as well as support the life science ecosystem that I think we want to build here. That this building provides that, sort of competitive edge to those groups, that they have this resource nearby to connect to. And there's a lot of ways that we can really think innovatively about how that actually lands itself on the site, whether it's waste heat recovery, whether it's solar panels, whether it's urban farming and other ways to really activate the space. Next slide. And then the senior housing, Chris Lee and Johnson and Lee really, did a fantastic job on creating a massing structure that's very flexible, respects light and air, connects to, kind of the neighborhood. And right now we're illustrating about 300 units of senior housing with a composite of common spaces, including an active roof deck, retail, as well as townhomes that are integrated into the building as well. So it provides multiple types of housing in one structure. Next slide. And to kind of build on and finish off this section with the guidelines we put together, right? A lot of these buildings are still being designed, but we really have a high aspiration for what they can be, and starting with really the ground floor. And how do we make sure that we're creating places that connect to community, that are active, that are, sort of high visibility, and that aren't, that creates really a place to be with Cottage Grove, and Cottage Grove has really become that main street, as well as respecting the activity and the vibrancy of the other streets as well. Next slide. Looking at massing, and as I mentioned, one of the big ideas behind the massing scheme, both starts really with respecting the angles and the views of the existing Prairie Shores buildings that are nearby, and then trying to find ways to make sure that we're bringing light, air, and views, both from the towers around it, but also from the future development and how that moves forward, as well as ideas about integrating parking, making sure that we're not creating negative or bad spaces, that all sides of the building, including the roofs, are active, lively, and vibrant spaces. Next slide. And lastly, really focusing on materials and sustainability, that these buildings will be of a high quality, and high quality building materials will be used. Looking at, as I showed on the ARC building, materials and finishes and colors that harken back to the Bronzeville heritage. Looking at ways to really make sure that we're also not creating ecologically safe spaces as well. So whether it's looking at the bird safety, building best practices, and trying to make sure that the ecology that we're creating is sustained, and these buildings aren't in the way, but they're operating as part of the natural systems. Next slide. And to just recap, the phase one is these four, sort of buildings, as well as the public open space, and it's about a 1.35 million square feet of development. Next slide. And this is a little bit of how we, see this moving forward for phase one specifically. So as Cindy mentioned, we're still going through the entitlement process. This is really a huge part of that. And we're excited to get your feedback, from this presentation. And then moving forward, in the 2021, in the 2022, really starting to get into programming of these spaces, as well as design of both the buildings, the park, engineering the streets and utilities, as well as understanding the metro station in a deeper way and how that moves forward. But a lot will be happening over the next 2 or 3 years to really get these projects and get the site reactivated. Next slide. Actually, one more. I think that's a duplicate. Apologies. So looking at phase two, really being kind of the bulk of the site. It's about 6.5 million square feet of future development with a myriad of uses that will really be market driven, but we've allowed for a lot of flexibility around that there will be kind of residential units, there will be retail, of course, kind of in these ground floors and in these spaces, opportunities for more public open space and to continue the rhythm of open spaces that kind of were outlined in the master plan. And just a wide variety of mixed uses that will be sort of active, lively, and vibrant. Next slide. And that kind of all together, sort of really kind of sums up the PD area and the Michael Reese site, sort of redevelopment. And kind of while it's as Scott mentioned, it may take 20 years. I think we're really excited that we can start to build some momentum, actually get that happening sooner. But there's a real opportunity and a real excitement around really recreating and reactivating this site for the future, as well as we haven't forgotten about kind of some of the things that we've shown at the last community meeting and at previous about the marshalling yards, and this plan and framework are flexible and allow for that to happen as that happens separately from this PD. All right, next slide.
So I touched earlier on the economic impact of both direct and indirect economic impacts of the site, but I just want to talk a little bit more about the community benefits as well. And I guess the most obvious one, and it's not even listed on here, is the fact that we have a site that's been vacant for more than 12 years and really has been just screaming for development. And so finally we'll get some life and some vitality to the site, to the community. Also, there's an environmental problem which will be cleaned up finally after a long while. So so aside from those community benefits, we're so, I mentioned before our partners in the community, also our partners at City Hall, the Cindy and her group at DPD and also at CDOT, have been fantastic and working through our challenges on the site and getting us to where we are today. And coming up with really, as a group, we all, kind of found these things to be community beneficial. The Welcoming Center, which has been a lot of discussion, is really, it's going to be something fantastic when it's finally open. Preserving the Singer Pavilion, but making it part of a continuum, not just the past, the present, but making something really special for the future that honors the past, but really shows something very forward-thinking and regenerative going forward. We've committed to 65% aspiration for minority participation on the project. We can go through the list of all these things, but just to understand that as we have our discussions in each and every of the MRAC meetings, each and every of the community meetings like this, and more importantly, even on smaller levels, even in our own meetings, we're always talking about the community benefits of what we're doing and making this thing and weaving it into the community and making it a very vibrant and active part of Brownsville and extending it all the way to the north and beyond. So next slide. I thought we had a little presentation of our Brownsville Lakeview logo. I don't see it. So I guess we can move on to questions and answers.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
So thanks again, Scott. Just would be remiss if we didn't mention, the whole team of folks that you mentioned, like CDOT, the Mayor's Office, Department of Planning and Development, CTA, Metra, a bunch of folks have been involved on this project, but especially the community. We appreciate your commitment and your input. We've listened and through the advisory committee are taking recommendations to heart. And speaking of that, now we will take time to answer questions here. And there were some questions that were submitted ahead of time, which we'll try to answer. Prudence, why don't you take the presentation down so perhaps we can see more of the panelists as folks kind of jump in and answer questions that we have. A couple of them have been answered in the presentation already, but I think bear repeating. I think Scott was just talking about the community benefits. But one of the questions is, how will Brownsville and Michael Reese be incorporated into the development? I think Pastor Smith, talked about that eloquently. We talked about it at the beginning of the presentation, but does anybody on the committee or otherwise just want to jump in and perhaps mention some of the community benefits that perhaps we haven't mentioned, or to reiterate some that we have already talked about? It's not a shy committee, so I know. Mr. McGee, why don't you share a couple of those with us?
I think the work that was done by the cultural committee has been very fruitful, and that in our last discussion we had with the design committee, we were making sure that the elements that they came up with would be a part of the whole site, whether it be in the sidewalk, whether it be through statues, whether it be through spaces in each building. That would be a palette that anyone designing a building would have to refer to and use as part of their design. And there was a lot of work put in on doing that.
Right. I think that's important, really important to emphasize that not only are we saying this, but we're making sure that it's codified within the plan development, that so, years to come, hopefully we're all here to see the fruits of all of the labor that's gone into this. But if things change, if I'm not alderman, if the advisory committee changes a bit, if the developer changes, those things will be codified. So they'll be in the PD, the memorialization of the history of Bronzeville and the history of the Michael Reese Hospital. So yeah, thank you for that, mentioning that, Mr. McGee. Any other, Ms. Muhammad, would you like to mention? Hold on, you're muted, Ms. Muhammad. Let me unmute you. Give me one.
Unmute. I just did it. Can you hear me?
We can, Ms. Muhammad. Go right ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Is it proper for me to ask 2, maybe 3-part questions so I won't have to say anything else tonight?
Well, why don't you go with one right now, Ms. Muhammad, and then if we have time at the end, we will definitely circle back. But go ahead and ask one now.
All right.
Yes.
In the senior building, will there be 1 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms? And I have not attended a meeting that deals with, I think it's architect, to discuss the size of the windows, because oftentimes the windows are so small, like those downtown in the, the jail downtown with those little
Federal building. I know what you're talking about, Ms. Muhammad.
Yeah, well,
yes, ma'am.
So I don't know if they discussed that, but this is going to be on the lake, and that's such a beautiful site. I've had views on the lake, and it's beautiful. And I just thought windows that would be kind of spacious would be really beautiful in these senior dwellings. So my question is, my concern is about the window, but my question is about how many bedrooms in the senior building. Right. And in slide 38 that we saw earlier, they mentioned vertical farming. What is vertical farming?
Okay, we'll take the first.
Here's the last one. Okay. I see the senior building is on 31st Street. Do that mean that they're going to have the bus to go that far? Because it doesn't go that way. So does that mean the bus is going to go that way to be convenient for the seniors? Or is it security wise not to have it to go that close to the area? Okay. Just a thought.
I'm glad you went ahead and took elder liberties and asked all 3 questions, because they're all good. I'll take a bite at the first one, and then other folks can jump in. But thank you, Ms. Muhammad. So the first question was dealing with the unit size and views for the senior homes or senior building. We haven't got down to that detail, but we do understand through your advocacy, through the Michael Reese Advisory Committee, that we want to make these homes for families, including seniors. So we're not trying to do, what are they called? The efficiencies and 1 bedrooms. I know they're not efficiencies anymore, but can't come to mind.
SROs.
Well, we're not, well, yeah, I wasn't mentioning SROs, but I meant, God, I can't remember what they're called, but
like micro units.
Yes, and 1 bedroom. So we're going to be very cognizant of making sure that we, market to families as well. And so I know that townhomes were discussed as well in that development. We're calling it kind of the senior home development, but we want it to be intergenerational. So we've been talking about having townhomes as well as other residents, but we are not trying to just do 1 bedroom and smaller rooms there. But we haven't gotten to that detail yet. And with your continued advocacy, I know that it'll be what you'd like it to be. I know your third question was around the CTA bus.
Yeah.
Can somebody, Kevin?
Yeah,
can you speak to that?
I'll jump in because CTA, I was told CTA wasn't going to be on the line here.
Sure, go ahead.
We have been in discussions with CTA as to what
Hi, Kevin.
hi, Ms. Muhammad, of what bus service CTA will provide. We've had a few meetings, but right now, even before the pandemic hit, they can't commit to any type of service right now. They have to see how the site develops for how they will provide service there. So the best we can do is we've been working with the GRIT team and CDOT to determine which streets that it's possible for buses to run on, because that's the one thing that they would have to know right now as part of the PD process. So it's I'm kind of not trying to avoid your question, but I'm answering as best as we can right now. Now, once the buildings get built, then there should be a better idea of where buses can go.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Ms. Muhammad, I'll just add that we'll probably have shuttles and things like that available for seniors as well. So there'll be lots of ways for people to get around.
Okay, because you know, it might not be a good idea to have a bus go up in that site. So, you know, for security measures. So I mean, it depends on what we agree on, but those things appeared in my mind. I am a what you call a CTA professional rider. And I know things happen when buses go up in certain areas that shouldn't be happening. So that's why I put it out there like that.
But it's important. And Ms. Muhammad, remind me, what was your second question? I apologize. Does somebody remember? She had three. We've got the first and the last.
It was the windows.
Oh,
Windows.
So I answered those. I answered those
Good
together.
question.
Yes, we will not have federal prison-sized windows. I can guarantee you that. And with those gorgeous views, we need every opportunity to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So thank you, Ms. Muhammad and Mr. Stansel. I want to just share with everybody that those are two members of our advisory committee, and they have been invaluable in making sure that, you know, in Mr. Stansel's case, that the transportation and his expertise that he brings there has been really invaluable. I think they're trying to hire him for his expertise, and Ms. Muhammad, especially around affordable housing and of course, housing for our elders. Thank you for all of your advocacy as well. So next question we will go to is, how do we make sure this neighborhood won't be gentrified? And that means different things to different people. But does somebody on the committee just want to take a stab at what we've kind of been doing intentionally to make sure that this is an inclusive community? Anyone? Mr. McGee, you want to take a stab at that again?
In all honesty, right now, you can't, that piece of property can only go up. So when somebody says gentrification, there needs to be a little more clarity what you mean by that, because right now it's just vacant parcels of land that have nothing on it. As far as it's not going to displace anybody because there's nobody there currently, and generally gentrification means where people get replaced or displaced. So there's no displacement. The real displacement came on that land when Michael Reese bought it, because there used to be the housing there was actually African-American homes.
Sure.
So that gentrification piece over time has already occurred. I think what's going to happen now, we will be bringing more people into the area that had no access to the area previously. So that gentrification question is very difficult to answer, because generally gentrification deals with displacement of people in that area.
Sure.
So it's like a hard question to answer.
No, it is. And I think, like I said, gentrification means different things to different people. I'll take a stab at it because Prairie Shores is there. It's existing. Prairie Shores has affordable units in it. As Scott can attest to, the financing that they did, and the owners have to be committed to affordable, a certain percentage, I believe it's maybe 50% affordable housing there as well. And so to that end, we've made sure that folks who are in Prairie Shores won't be displaced. We've also made sure that there's a considerable amount of affordable housing that will be included on this site as opposed to being able to be built elsewhere. So we are keeping that in mind. But to your point, Mr. McGee, this is a new development. And so, there won't be displacement right on the site, but certainly it can affect, sites next to it. There folks like the Stratford condominiums or other communities that live right next to it. And I know that there's a question in the chat about what happens to the communities adjacent to it. I can't say that this won't have an impact on that, but we certainly have been thinking and trying to strategically think about, how we deal with affordable housing. But also, we want market rate housing on there as well. And we want commercial and businesses. But we have strategically been thinking about making sure we've got small businesses and looking kind of at the pro forma ahead of time to do that. So.
Yeah, and I just want to add, Alderman, if I could, just
Sure.
so much of this project is about job creation, and so much of it is about job creation for people in the neighborhood and in the community, in the ward. So it not only creates those jobs, but it creates customers for those jobs and more opportunities. So it's not gentrification, but it's really community. It's a community advancement and really community density that'll happen, not gentrification.
Right. So
I think, Alderman, also-
it's community growth. And sometimes growth happens with a community and sometimes it happens without a community. And so we're just being intentional to make sure that it happens with
I
the
think
community.
the other part that is very important that's come out of this is the ability to have a destination place where you have shops and you have a food court, or you have small
Amenities.
businesses where currently, if you try to do that on 35th Street, there's just not physically enough space to do that. And this gives an opportunity to now provide those spaces that we can have some more coffee shops or some eateries or a bakery that can be in that complex.
Mhm.
Right. True. So we want all the upsides of amenities and all of those things. All right. Another question that has come up is how does this PD and accompanying illustrations convey a commitment to use portions of the revitalized Singer Pavilion as a site for the Michael Reese Hospital Memorial Museum?
Not sure how to answer that. So, the idea is to create community space in the Singer Pavilion also, in addition to the Brownsville Welcome Center. And we have a firm commitment to honor the history of the Michael Reese Hospital. I don't know exactly what that looks like right now or how big it is, but I can tell you we've already secured the original Michael Reese, statue of Michael Reese, for example, and we are doing what we can to get as much historical items as possible.
Yeah. And as I said earlier, and someone else can jump in too, we're also, trying to codify that in the PD. So, this community meeting isn't the beginning or the end of this process, although we are trying to fine tune, the first phase, but we will continue to work on some of these things beyond this meeting as we move towards city council approval and towards the planning commission approval as well. So we'll continue to work towards those, but we are trying to codify it so that, again, it can be memorialized, from here until years to come. Let's see. Another question. Will phase 3 marshalling yards be its own separate PD or an amendment to the current one?
I can answer that, Alderman, if you want.
Sure. Thank you, Cindy.
Yeah, sure. Marshalling yards is not part of the current PD application. So if it were to be redeveloped in the future, it could either be its own PD or it could be, we could amend this PD application and include that extra site area.
Thank you. Thanks, Cindy. Next question. The Michael Reese site is a designated federal opportunity zone with specified financial benefits for investors. How will the benefits of being a designated opportunity zone be shared with the community?
To share those benefits is probably not something that really is possible other than as an investor. So those things don't accrue to the developer, they don't accrue to the shop owner, they don't accrue to the necessarily the business. They accrue only to the investor. But what it will do is make the investments on the site in companies or in buildings on the sites more attractive to investors, and therefore there is the indirect benefit of jobs and business and all those things that come with it. But it's not a thing that can get passed through to anybody, including ourselves.
Yeah. So opportunity zones, can you just talk about what
Sure.
that is and perhaps how the community can actually invest? I mean, it's certainly open to anyone who wants to invest. So you could talk about that.
Sure.
And then perhaps as a community, we can, figure out how to market it better, or advertise how people can invest in the community. So just give us a little background on a primer, very, very short primer.
I'll try.
On what that means.
As part of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, there was a provision called opportunity zones. And these are zones that each governor really got to designate 25% of his or her enterprise zones as opportunity zones. So the Michael Reese site was designated by the city and the state as an opportunity zone. What opportunity zone means is that if you invest capital gains, right? So it's not, you can't invest part of your salary or you can't invest that type of thing. But if you sold something and made money on it, you can take that money within 180 days of that sale and invest it into something of tangibility in an enterprise, in an opportunity zone. For example, if you bought a business and you had a printing press in there, and you bought that printing press with qualified opportunity zone capital gains dollars, and you held that asset for 10 years. So it could be a printing press, it could be a piece of it could be a building. It does any tangible item in an opportunity zone. If you invest in it and hold it for 10 years, and that item appreciates in value, if you bought it for $10 and in 10 years it was worth $50, that $40 would be tax-free when you sell it. So if somebody in the neighborhood found a business that was going to be located on the Michael Reese site, for example, and invested in that business and stayed with that business for 10 years and then sold out of that business, whatever value was created with that investment would be tax-free in 10 years.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
A lot more nuance to it, but that's the gist.
Yeah. Giving us an idea, and ideas, light bulbs went off in my head when you said that. So we'll figure out how to get the community involved in that as well.
It's a great place for small businesses to start as a result.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds like it. Next question. We asked that one. Will parking be hidden behind active space or below grade instead of ugly freestanding garages? Somebody has an opinion there.
I think speaking for everybody on the team, we all are looking for this to be the most handsome overall development, that we know of. So that does mean being creative and being responsible with how we deal with not just parking, but where trash is stored, where tanks of any type might be located, where backup generators go. All those things, will be done tastefully and in a way that keeps them from sight.
Great. Softball was invented on the Michael Reese site, and there was a monument there to this effect, although it was stolen after the hospital closed. Will there be a softball field and monument in this development?
Didn't know that. Knew that the 16-inch softball was invented in Chicago with broomsticks and rags, which is basically how it started. We don't have plans for that right now because we're just finding out about it. But I doubt there'll be a true softball field on the site. But we can certainly do something to honor the this site is the site of a lot of firsts, right? Michael Reese Hospital, the first one to have an ambulance that didn't have a horse pulling it. It was the first one to do a subcutaneous shot, the first place to have a baby incubator. Dr. Beckman can tell us so many things that Michael Reese itself were the first at. So we should honor all those things, in one way or another.
Yeah, and I think if we can maybe if we can find that sort of monument. I don't know if the pieces of it still exist somewhere. That would be great to find. But I think it's, as Scott mentioned, there's lots of sort of those tidbits that we'd love to we're doing our best to track down and find ways to integrate into the site.
Yeah, but right now there's not plans for a softball field, although there's several more phases. Who knows whether that will come in to play.
I believe that monument still exists. I think somebody must have recovered it prior to the demolition. Maybe the prior owner or the Jewish Federation knows where that. It's a very small monument, but it's well documented. That monument is. There's photographs of it, and there's the history of that is well documented.
We'll look into it for sure.
I'll look into it as well.
Great.
And there are baseball fields, in the parks south of this site as well as west of this site.
Okay, next question. What was the vetting process for the current developer?
I can answer that. So there was an RFP process in 2016, and so the current developer was selected as part of that RFP process. So, as any RFP process, the documentation for that RFP submission process was available to the public at that time. And the GRIT team was selected in 2017.
Got it. Thank you.
Can I just add that, Alderman King, a reminder step there that all of us were involved in the review. We weren't able to finalize and say who to select, but we did review, and that's early on. The committee developed extensive criteria and rating system to review them and give you the important feedback to bring to the city council.
Yeah, I can't say how invaluable the committee has been, but very early on, we got pushback about our committee at first, but now they're duplicating it. So throughout the city on striking development. So we were trailblazers, and you're right. We were involved, although anonymously, we didn't know who the developer was, but we certainly saw the applicants and their application, and were very involved in that early on in the process. So thanks for reminding us of that, Professor. I appreciate it. Next question, and a good one. How are mixed-use developments like this being redesigned in light of the need for physical distancing, and in light of the pandemic? I hope that by the time the first building's up, that the pandemic will be laughing about this at some point. But how can someone on the development team talk about that?
Happy to. This specific site is special because more so than any other mega development in the city, we have a lot of open space, we have a lot of green space, and we have a heavy focus on sustainability. So one thing that we all know is when we have more green space, we have cleaner air. We also have a lot of water management. So while we're thinking critically about places for folks to engage, we're also thinking about the amount of space on this site, over 10 acres, which is about 23% of the site, that is already going to be green space. In addition, and that'll be creating space for folks to be separate, but we're also thinking a lot about biomedical tech. So this specific site, while we're talking about life sciences across the city, is bringing the #9 leader in the world for medical research, and that includes COVID. Israel is leading in COVID research, so we're looking forward to bringing Sheba. So next time, if this ever happens again or something crazy happens, we'll have someone in our back door to help.
And furthermore, we have corporate and technology companies that we're working with that will affect how we design not just buildings, but the neighborhood as a whole. So, as we expect this to be a smart grid, specifically Johnson Controls is working with us to do sensors and do things inside and outside buildings to make sure environmental health is at the forefront.
Great, thank you. Will multiple architects of superior pedigree be used to design buildings that have visual diversity and cohesiveness?
Yes.
Yes. Right now, we're
Yes.
using a number of people. We're using Jason McLennan, who is on this call. He's created the Living Building Challenge, which is about environmental and sustainability. And we're going to have one of the greenest buildings in the world, in addition to local architects, Chris Lee and Johnson and Lee and a number of other folks who are thinking critically about materiality that is already in the community and how do we embed those things inside. So we're not just looking to build the nicest, prettiest, shiniest, most innovative space. We are also making sure that the nicest, prettiest, most innovative space includes design and materiality throughout the community.
But we have the opportunity to create an iconic part of the skyline here too. Chicago is already one of the most beautiful skylines anywhere, and we have the unique opportunity to add to that. So the answer is a firm yes.
Exactly.
Right. Someone's asking why are maximum heights so low? Others are asking why are buildings so high? So take your pick, answer both at one time.
We're bound by zoning for one. So there is an FAR requirement that we have to adhere within. The idea has always been really from the early input of the MRAC to create more height along, the marshalling yards along Lakeshore Drive to really take advantage of the skyline we're just talking about and the views of the lake, and to use the Michael Reese site in the middle between Prairie Shores and the marshalling yards as more of the valley of commercial activity, of innovation, a little more of the social food and beverage, hospitality type space. So I think that for our first couple of phases here, we intend to go a little lower on the south, towards 31st Street and kind of crescendo it up as we get closer to I-55 extension there. And then have more height along the lake, which we think is appropriate.
Yeah, and it also has to do with trying to get light and air down to the street. We don't want, kind of a bunch of tall buildings that are blocking, but we also want to be aware of, kind of the difference in sizes of buildings that will allow us to provide that, additional open space to also, sort of just make sure that there is airflow and sun and, sort of beauty sort of at the ground plane. So the height limit allows us to provide that diversity while still staying, working with the massing to stay at a certain, sort of character and street level.
Right. Can you talk about the redevelopment agreement a bit and how some of the community benefits will be codified in those and just kind of what that process is like? I know, and most people don't know, and I think it's been a learning process for the committee as well as myself on plan developments, what that really does. Versus what redevelopment agreements do. But talk about the PD, kind of what that does, just shortly, a sentence or two, in terms of zoning. And then the redevelopment agreement, what that does, and how some of the things that the community has been advocating for will be memorialized in both of those. Probably DPD or Tim
we've
on the
Tim
line.
Jeffries.
Yeah,
We've got Tim Jeffries on the line.
So I think others are Tim Jeffries, Deputy Commissioner of the Financial Incentives Division. I think others are better positioned to talk about the PD, but I mean, I think generally speaking, the PD controls things like the height and the bulk and the overall uses on the site, basically the built environment. The redevelopment agreement, on the other hand, is really gets to the nuts and bolts of a contractual agreement between the city and the developer, in this case, Crit, about what is going to happen specifically on the site. So in this case, the redevelopment agreement will be tied to the land sale. And it will, we anticipate that it will outline, the majority of all of the things that have been discussed here, namely the set aside for the welcoming center, any provisions for, that may come out in the future moving forward about how that space will be used. Yeah, goes on the line.
Great. Did you talk about how the community benefits will be codified in those? I'm sorry if I missed that.
Well, I mean, I think it's just it will be codified in the redevelopment agreement in as much as that it's a contract between the city, and so they will agree to do something, and if something doesn't happen, that will trigger an action by the city. I don't think that we've gotten to the point to know what that would be. That could be a financial penalty. It could be severing rights to future land sales. Sort of, it just.
Yeah, we want all that. Just to make sure. But okay.
Please.
Great. I've been going back and forth between questions that were submitted beforehand, but let me. One question was just, will this be available? Presentation be available after? And yes, it will be available on our website at kingfourthward.com, as well as the planning department's website. So it definitely will be available later. What is the expected cost for phase 1?
So that was, so phase 1 includes the 4 buildings we talked about, right? So we expected, I just wanted to make sure I have the numbers exactly right. Give me 1 second, I don't misspeak. Let's see, the cost, well, it's about 1,350,000 square feet. And I don't remember our budget for that. David, do you have that offhand?
Let me see if I can pull it up. No, we'd initially had $500 million, 500 million for the phase 1 development.
Sorry, I'm having to pull this. I don't have the. Can you scroll through? Is it listed on our?
It's not on the slide, no. Well, let us make sure, like, what we can do is make sure we get that number in the slide before we put it up on the website. And we can do that tonight really quickly and get it to you, Alderman, just so that's in there.
But in a nutshell, lots of money.
It was roughly $500 million, phase 1, although I don't have the exact number in mind. And that did not include the data center.
That didn't include the data center, yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably more like 600 million, roughly. Although, again, because the buildings aren't fully designed, these are just estimates until we have better designs on them.
Great. Is the plan to use the 25 million in education funds to be used in existing schools nearby, such as Dunbar and Persian? We are still in need of a high quality neighborhood high school. So the plan is to take an assessment of the current needs in the community, and then to respond to that. I know obviously of plans for a high school in the area that didn't come to fruition, but I know that the city is still looking at that. We will look at this site in that context, as well as density in the area as well. Anybody else want to take a stab at that?
Yes, that's right, Alderman. So the idea is that we're going to do the full assessment in partnership with CPS as soon as we're very clear, especially once we have better projections of what residential will look like on the rest of the site, what the actual need is and at what grade level. That's when the determination will be made about whether or not a new school will be made, whether or not there will be an expansion of an existing school, et cetera, and what investment will be needed. But at this time, because there's not a ton of residential in phase one, and keep in mind that phase two is about 2/3 the size of phase one. We don't have that answer, but we will hopefully soon.
Sure, but it's not just what's in this phase, it's also what's in the surrounding community. So the school would be for the community, not just this this development. Just want to clarify that. All right. Let's see. How do you get more info about companies who want to help build the data center?
For the folks who want to help build the data center, I'll put my email in the chat and email me, please. If you want to do business on the site, email me. I'll be the point person for small business engagement, workforce development from the development team. So if you're looking to do business on the site, email me and I'll put my email in the chat.
Sure. And you can also get in touch with members of the advisory committee, with our office as well, and we will pass that information along, and we'll be involved in that process too. So, are there any other connections besides the pedestrian bridge close to 29th Street to be designed to increase the connectivity with Burnham Park?
Currently, no. We've kind of focused on 31st Street and 29th Street. I know initially in our kind of previous planning, we looked at kind of could we do something closer to 26th Street, but it's prohibitive with the Stevenson Expressway alignment. So primarily it will be 29th Street and 31st Street. And I know 29th Street I think fits a previous plan that was done years ago. I think Leonard schooled us on that one.
Okay. The Michael Reese Advisory Council has a subcommittee for cultural, community, history, and arts. They submitted a nearly 30-page report detailing the history of the Michael Reese Hospital and the Bronzeville community. Is it possible to obtain a copy of this report? I will talk to that subcommittee, and if they want to make that public, which I'm certain they will, but they still may be kind of in the, planning phase for that. But I think that's probably something they would want to share. If not, they'll get it, I think, for public consumption, get it ready for public consumption soon. Aside from inclusion of minority contractors, are there specific goals for utilization for local entrepreneurs, such as creatives for the cultural asset development and a pathway for inclusion participation? Local restaurants for catering, local companies for landscaping, maintenance, etc. All of these are limited examples. I'll take a stab at that, and then if somebody else from the advisory committee wants to jump in, but we have been, very strategic about figuring out how to include the community from, the aspirational goal of having 65% minority participation, to write down of businesses or space for small businesses. And so we are definitely looking for participation on professional services as well. And so in order to obtain kind of that 65% goal, we're going to be looking, for all types of services to be provided on the site, both short and long term. And certainly for small businesses as well. Like I said, we've already looked ahead to try and write down 10% of all of the commercial space on the site to be written down. And so we are thinking ahead strategically. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Happy to, if it's fine. Unless you want someone from MRAC.
Yeah, somebody on the advisory committee that's been working for that, towards that, perhaps.
Well, Alderman, I can just say that we are working, as our group is working very diligently for this connectivity of making sure that local and the minority owned is all part of this development constantly. We're always looking at that constantly. And I can't see, like you said, who knows how long we'll all be here together. So those are the reasons why we are looking at this redevelopment agreement as well. So we can continue to ensure that getting the local and the smaller businesses invested into this project.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Sanchez Carlson. I appreciate that. Another member of our committee. We'll take a few more questions. Probably try and wind down in the next 5 to 10 minutes. But how will there be views in the neighborhood? And I think there was a correction that was made. Lake views. Since there are a wall of skyscrapers planned to the east of it.
Yeah, I think just to talk a little bit about massing. So one of the things that we've done just in the framework is start to set up a series of view corridors based off of the existing Prairie Shores, sort of alignment. And then what we'll do, and the massing that we showed is pretty preliminary, but what we tend to do is actually we have, sort of a software that we run to try and make sure that all the buildings aren't blocking one another, right? So that there's views that move through and that there's light and air and space to see. So you're not, looking at a wall of skyscrapers from any building on Lake Park Avenue.
Okay. Next question. What activities and services can we start implementing on the site in the near term for local businesses, residents, community groups, and schools to make an impact on the future programming of the site? I think, we've spoke to that a bit. I think we're thinking strategically, but I'll let somebody else from the advisory committee talk a little bit further about that. Not all at once, but somebody, please. No one? This is the most quiet we've been. So like I said, I think we've been strategically thinking about that throughout, whether it's been kind of our aspirational goals to having more local and minority participation, whether it's been writing down, cost for potential small businesses in the area, whether it's been thinking about internships for our students right across the street at Dunbar to work on the site, not only kind of in the trades, but also in professional services. Whether it's been thinking about the art and culture and the history of the site and how that will be included down the line. So I think we have been thinking about that. Certainly, if there are other ideas, we are open to them. But I think we've been, very strategic about making sure, there are opportunities for the community for this development, which will have a meaningful impact on the larger community. Let's see, let's try and end. That was already asked. Will there be an RFP process to choose the construction team?
Yeah, there'll be many phases to this development, and there'll be opportunity for bidders on all phases, open to all. It's not a true RFP process, right? Because it's more it's more done by you put out the bid for for contractors to bid on, and then the bids are considered.
Okay.
Yes, we'll have a portal available as those things become available.
Yeah, and in the Michael Reese Advisory Committee, as well as others, will be involved, kind of in seeking input, and for those who are interested as well. Like Scott said, there's going to be many phases and a lot of development, so hopefully a lot of opportunity as well will come with that. I think this is a good question to end on, and because there was a lot of discussion about it, and I'm sorry that I had forgotten. The question reminded me, but there was a lot of discussion about the name for the former Michael Reese site. We had a meeting, just on that specific question. We have landed on Bronzeville Lakefront. And there was going to be a slide on that, I think, and somehow that didn't make the deck. There were a couple of names that we were looking at, but we felt with the community feedback, especially because I think we were heading in one direction and pivoted after hearing feedback from the advisory committee, from the community at large, but have landed on Bronzeville Lakefront. And so that is, I think that was in the first slide. I think it will be displayed on our last slide, along with other information that you can use to reach out to us to find out more about this particular site. As we said early, this is one of many community meetings that we've had. And we are committed to having, I am committed to having at least another meeting, a larger meeting like this before our city council meeting. We are starting kind of to wind down ideas for phase one. They aren't written in stone yet, but they are, being mixed in the mortar. So, they're beginning to set. And we have had a lot of great feedback from the community, from the advisory committee, and we'll continue to take that feedback to heart and to put it into this project. And again, so that it will be a project that the community can be proud of. So with that, I would like to publicly thank, all of the partners who have been involved with this process, especially the Michael Reese Advisory Committee, the development team, the Department of Planning and Development led by Cindy Rubik here. But thank you to Commissioner for letting us have her for so much time, Commissioner Cox, Mayor and your office for all of your input, all of the departments, CDOT, like I said, CTA, and everybody that's been involved in this project. It's really been a lot of time and effort put into it, but I think we'll be very proud of what we come up with through all of our input and through working together. So thank you again for tuning in. And again, we will see you again shortly as we continue to solidify the plans for the first phase, but also for the plan development going forward. Thank you again.
Thank you, Alderman.
Alderman.
Thanks,
Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Do not shut off yet, please.
It's still live.
I know.
Let me know when you want me to stop the live streaming.
Stop it now.